Yeah. So if you're ready, I'm ready to roll. Are you ready to gavel this?
I am.
Murray Mast, my old friend. Good to see you, buddy.
It's good to see you.
You're like a warm blanket on these cold March days.
It's 62 here,
Shut up.
63.
Shut up. It's going to be warm here in a couple days, but I think we're
Yeah,
still on the tail end of whatever cold snap we had.
yeah, yeah. We were cold last couple of days, but
Well, well, first off, Murray, I want to start this podcast by apologizing for throwing you a 40th birthday party when you were 32. I was young, I was immature, and I didn't realize how that might have made you feel. So I apologize.
I appreciate that. I'm sure now that you're
I'm of
of
age.
right? So you fully appreciate it now.
I'm a man of 41, so yeah.
Yeah, you were probably in your early 20s back then. So
I think I might have been 25, and it was hilarious that we were making fun of you, and you know. But well, Murray, I wanted to ask you I mean, we've done a podcast before, I believe, right? This isn't your first time on, and I'm sure your life just blew up after the first one, as most of my guests' lives do. So I want to hear about that. I want to hear about what you've done with the windfall of money you've earned from this podcast.
well, the paparazzi's not. That's not all it's cracked up to be.
I know, right? It's hard when the PAS press comes out to snap photos of you, and um, but I am curious, genuinely curious, why you wanted to do another one. I put a note out on Facebook. I mean, you're my buddy, and I'll talk to you anytime, of course. And all joking aside, but I put that note out on Facebook, and there was I got a fair amount of responses, but I'm always surprised when I'm just like, anybody want to talk about anything? You want to talk about racism? You want to talk about anything? Whatever. I'm your guy. Like, there's like usually I'm surprised at how few people actually want to talk. So I'm curious, why'd you want to do another one?
I actually just wanted to talk to you.
Oh, all right.
Not just like friend to friend, but no real agenda necessarily. Just catching up and seeing how you were doing in the new reality of COVID and how it's affected you. I don't know. Not didn't necessarily expect to be interviewing you, but
well, I'll say I'm flattered. No one ever asked me questions, and I it's my podcast. I came up with the idea. I get it. It's my job to ask the questions, but I way prefer you're a teacher. You know what it's like. Anybody have any questions and no one says anything? It's awful. So I appreciate you being willing to ask, but maybe that's something we should just talk about, because I have the same questions for you. I mean, you're someone I've known for a long time. There's a lot of issues right now there always has been issues around race. But right now there's a pretty solid lens being put on race relations in the United States. I think in a way that it hasn't, well, again, maybe I'm speaking from ignorance. It feels like there's a different type of lens now being looked at, or in the way that we're looking at things. And I don't want to imply that that's bad. It seems new to me. And so
I think it seems new to us as white people, to be honest with you. I mean,
yeah, totally. That's my ignorance. That's why I said that.
and that's the like you said, the lens that it's through certainly makes it different. I think it's eye opening for all of us who we've all. It's not that we haven't been aware of racism in our whole lives, but I think, like you said, there's a magnifying glass there that's spotlighting it and calling it out, and I think that's all. It's. Maybe it wasn't inevitable, but I'm glad we got here.
I wish it didn't. I mean, yeah. I mean, I don't know what to say without setting the world on fire, or at least feeling like I am. But you're my friend, and so I'll just talk to you. Like I wish that. Well, first of all, I wish George Floyd hadn't been murdered in broad daylight. Like, of course. Like, of course. I'm glad it was filmed. I'm horrified that it even had to exist to be filmed in the first place. In the same way with Rodney King, in the same way with Michael Brown, or any of this stuff. The thing for me that has been the biggest sort of bummer, or the thing that I've been the most disappointed, or in myself actually, is the ability to navigate all of that while being trapped inside on a screen.
Yeah,
like that's that's the thing that, like, I feel like we're sort of, the fear I have isn't that we're that it's not the right thing to try to solve these issues. Like, it fucking is, of course. I think we as a humanity are not acknowledging our lack of skill set with the tools that we're forced to communicate with each other on these issues about. Like, we have to talk about this stuff. Like, even you and I are talking face to face. This is as face to face as we can get.
Right.
But most of this stuff is happening on Facebook or comment threads, or there's somebody, there's a big panel with like 45 people on it, and I really worry, like, 20 years from now, what are going to be the end results? We planted the No Child Left Behind seed 20 years ago, and we're now seeing the results of that. And that's, yes, there are race things tied up in that, but that was just like an educational policy. We're retooling our entire society right now through social media, and I just have this trying to hold two thoughts. It's like, yes, of course, but, like, oh my God, we're doing it on social media, and I just feel like, oh,
yeah,
oof.
it's frustrating, and it's people need to be around people. I mean, it's sort of the, we get it. We're already in our echo chambers at times as people, and all this is doing is just making it, it's sort of exacerbating the whole thing. I mean, now we listen to what we want to listen to, and we can tune into our own specialized news that tells us the things we want to hear or that we agree with, or.
Well, and you're not forced to. I mean, the thing that this past year, the hardest thing for me, that, just to answer your question, the hardest thing for me has been being away from complicated spaces. My house, it's not that my house isn't a complicated space. My wife challenges me on the regular, but it's a place where I'm free to say what I want with no judgment. I have less freedom in a pan yard, but I have way more complicated, nuanced relationships in that environment than I've had this entire year. Yeah. And I learned from being in a black space. I learned from being the only white guy in a pan yard in Trinidad. Like, that to me is like, holy crap, that is an Ivy League education. Just not even saying anything, just being in a yard and just observing the way another culture, another people, another race, another everything operates. Yeah. And that, if I want to call that a drug or a thing that, like, makes my brain light up, it's been shut off for a year, and it's that part of me has atrophied in a way that's made me question my entire life. Like, what am I doing? Am I doing the right thing? Did I spend the time in those places the way people are now saying you should? Did I take advantage of anything? Did I do something wrong? Did I alienate somebody? Or do I have a misplaced assessment of the level of trust I've built in those communities? Like, only because I see those communities upset and I'm trapped in my home in Manchester and I can't help,
Well, and I think, like, and you and I have talked about this before. I mean, to me, the first time I was down there was one of the biggest learning experiences, one of the biggest educational moments for me as a person that I've ever, I don't know that I can pinpoint anything more educational, more that taught me more about culture and in some ways revealed what I didn't know.
Right.
Revealed how it made me interested more in culture, more in just the fact that different people live their lives in different ways, and that's okay.
Right.
Like, I can't say much more than everybody should travel, and nobody can right now. I mean, how do you can't confront some of these issues without actually being in those arenas and seeing people that are different from you, and understanding that everybody just wants to live a better life, on whatever terms those are, and culture, race, religion, all of it. It gets frustrating to watch and see people think that that's what really matters, is the differences rather than the similarities.
Well, what are some of the things that are like, I mean, let me ask you, like, what has been some of the things for you that have been a struggle this past year? Like, is anything I'm saying, like, have you had similar things in your head bouncing around, or have they been different? And like, what have they been for you?
Um, I think I got really over focused on the presidential politics and all that stuff. I believe we were living together during 9/11, right?
Hmm.
Yeah,
I came
that's
home
right.
and I came home and watched the second plane hit.
Right.
Um,
Yes. Yeah. And I got that way then too.
mm-hmm.
I got really kind of focused, over focused, and had to sort of snap out of it. And I think that, when you can't go out and do things, and you're not doing the things you normally do. I mean, I'm not out gigging, and I'm not out, traveling at
Mm-hmm.
all.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I get caught up in that world, and mostly what you see is negative.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just the way the world's been. But I will say that since the election, I kind of have tuned out of it a bit, almost as a like a reset, a personal reset.
Mm-hmm.
Like I don't have to pay attention to see what disaster has unfolded as much. I don't feel the need. Like, I don't feel like I have to monitor it.
Well, it feels like our
Yeah, but I don't feel like I do.
well, the thing that Trump, I feel that I learned from Trump more than anything was this idea that, like, I don't think in the same way I didn't realize my life before last March was pre-pandemic. Like, now in my life there is pandemic life and pre-pandemic life and post-pandemic life, and there will be another, and that post-pandemic life, when we come emerge, is just the pre-pandemic life before the next one. Like,
Yeah.
that's a weird sort of realization to know that all of the way I just assumed my life was going to be, touring
Yeah.
with So Percussion, I got a new suitcase that'll go through the airports easily, like all those things, like none of that matters anymore. Everything's new, everything's different, and it's just a weird mindset to have to be in. And
Yeah. I remember you posted something. This is like, right soon after the whole thing went. Um, the whole pandemic took off and everything got shut down. And I'm going to say it less eloquently than you did, but it was something like, it's amazing to realize that you just, you spend your whole life working over, for years and years, and only to realize that you just, you know, build a sandcastle at the edge of the
Beef.
tide coming in or something. Like,
Yeah.
it was something to that effect.
You had your back to the ocean the whole time, and I didn't realize it. Like, I just thought I was in the middle of a field.
Coming.
Yeah, yeah.
And I felt like that. I mean, I had all my gigging was really taking off, and I had all this work coming in, and I was planning to play a 6-week show of an American in Paris, and a 6-week run, and
That's a lot of money. I mean, 6-week run that's more than just a gig. I mean, that's a job.
that was
Yeah,
seven
yeah.
7 shows a week.
Yeah.
And not gone.
Mm-hmm.
All of that stuff. It made me reassess, I think how fragile everything is, how fragile not only our Earth is, but democracy and itself. And gosh,
I did a podcast with Richard Preston, who wrote this book called The Hot Zone, about Ebola, and we were talking about COVID. This was like early on in the thing, and he's like, here's a little analogy I'd like to give you that will let you know how vulnerable Earth is, but even more specific, the human species. He studies infectious diseases and writes about them extensively. He's like, if you took every coronavirus particle on Earth and just packed them together, like right next to each other, every virus on Earth of COVID-19, it would fit inside of a deck of cards. And so, like, take a deck of cards and just go, and that is what shut down the world.
Yeah.
Like, that's crazy
Yeah.
to me to
That,
think, like, the size of a coronavirus part, like, that's all it took to infect the whole world and shut everything down. And it's like that realization, but then also the thing I learned from Trump too about when you talk about the politics thing, I've noticed something similar. Like, I'm engaging with it less, but I'm not trying to. I'm being forced less to engage with it because it's like what Trump made me realize is, oh, we're all actually in that wave pool at Geauga Lake, except Trump just found the button to turn it on. And we're all floating there, and every 5 minutes he's like, wave, and we'd all just be like, what? And now Biden is over here, he's just like, let's just cement that button shut. Biden's just not a wave pool guy. And I don't agree with all of his policies,
yeah.
but
I
the
but
general sort of the waves on the water right now are just naturally calmer because he's not pressing that damn button every 5 minutes.
right. Yeah, and in fact, if anything, I feel like he ought to communicate a little bit more with us as Americans. But that's that's a whole maybe another topic. But
Yeah.
it is a nice respite from like you said the wave coming, and you just know it's coming. You just don't know what it's going to be. You don't know. It's like the wave pool, but you know how some of the wave pools have like this one's a really big one, or this one's going to be a bunch of little ones, or and then now you also don't know what direction it's going to come from. I mean, it's like you don't know if it's going to be a hailstorm from above or sharks in the water, or so I think lately I've actually, like, last week all I did was work on taxes. Really just like doing mundane sort of some more sort of things and refocusing on okay, how do I get some more work again here, and
And how are you feeling? I mean, now that we're definitely not on the other side of this at all, but now that we're far enough into it to identify some mile markers, like where do you see where are you in this process? Are you feeling like there's a foot out the other side now, or like it's still murky and you're not sure?
um I'm optimistic, maybe naively, but that maybe by the fall we're maybe not taking our masks off, but maybe participating with one another much more uh, naturally, and being able to perform music, albeit with some adjustments to space, and I mean, wind instruments, that whole thing.
Yeah, it's been a rough year for lung-based instruments. Singers, reed players, like it's just been. I mean, I see these pictures, like these memes where people are like, "This is ridiculous," and you've got this poor kid playing a clarinet with a mask, and there's a hole in the mask, and it's like, no, I understand why you think that, why you're trolling and you think it's ridiculous. It is ridiculous. You think that kid thinks this isn't ridiculous? Of course they do. Like, we're all trying to figure this out. And as far as I can tell, there haven't been any super spreader hot cross bun events at fifth grade bands. So maybe let's lay off of them for 2 seconds.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I actually, most of my income now with this going on has come from teaching private lessons and, helping the high school drumline where my kids go to school. Just because what else can I do? And they've been meeting with masks, and I will say for my kids, just being it wouldn't matter whether it was marching band or soccer or, taekwondo or, whatever it was, the fact that they're interacting, working with other kids, like trying to build something, has been, therapeutic, not just for them, but for me. I mean, I can definitely see a before we started trying this, in person with kids, a before and after in both of my kids, you know, just like the way they kind of shut down. I kind of shut down. I mean, when the whole thing started, it was like a big snow day.
Right.
You know,
Yeah, yeah,
I went
yeah.
to Sam's Club and bought the industrial size Oreos, and you know,
I bought the industrial size Bacardi is what I bought.
did the more family friendly version.
I don't have family. I don't have any kids, so it's okay.
But you know, and then we all, you know, we all got bloated, and then we, you know, realized, oh, this is we're going to be in this a while, and I think we all got a little depressed, and we were all nervous because my wife's in healthcare, as you know, so
Hmm.
you know, there was a lot more stress at that time. I think at least now we're in some sort of equilibrium, and she's gotten her shots. I mean, she got them like, I think they came out, maybe it was, I think it was on a Monday, and she got them the following she got her first shot the following Monday.
Well, can I ask you? I mean, if you don't mind, I mean, if the question's too personal and you don't want to speak on her behalf, don't just tell me to shut up. But I'm curious. All of the reports about the frontline healthcare workers, to me, every time I open the newspaper, it just feels like I'm about to read, like, Nightmare on Elm Street, about like everything, all the stories about the healthcare workers quitting, retiring early, calling in sick, like just like it's just too stressful. And I'm asking the question, sort of, it seems like the obvious one, but is that accurate? Is what you're seeing in your wife coming home, or is some of it possibly anecdotal and there's some overlap, or what has been your experience or her experience with this stuff?
Just to clarify her job, so she's a nurse practitioner in oncology.
Mm.
So she's seeing cancer patients
Right.
coming through the door, and so there's a little overlap. It's not like it's an ER.
Mm-hmm.
So there's, you know, um, she's seeing vulnerable patients
Mm-hmm.
to COVID, and they're more like moments where like somebody comes in to the office, and you know they've got the symptoms, and they're just going to the office anyway for their
Mm-hmm.
regular, you know, treatment of whatever, and she's like, nope, turn around and we're sending you over to
Right.
the ER,
Right.
kind of thing, you know. And you know, her coming home and like, I'm going straight to the shower, you know, don't block the door because
I mean,
make way in the kitchen.
the reason I ask that question is like the stuff. I mean, I think about the way COVID has made my job, touring or getting on a train or being in the room to rehearse has made it exponentially more difficult. I'm not a frontline worker, but it's made my job less enjoyable on almost every front. And like like even though she's working in oncology, like there's another now layer to the onion of worry that she has to deal with that she maybe
Oh,
didn't have to think about before.
yeah, and I mean, we had lots of discussions about it early on. I think um, at some point you just have to put the blinders on and say, I'm dealing with this patient who's coming through the door. I'm doing everything I can. Um, and you know, there were a couple times she had to go get tested, and
Mm-hmm.
because you know there was somebody came in, she saw him. They found out 2 days later after she sent him to the ER that in fact they did have COVID. I mean, she was protected. She
Yeah.
had as much protection as one can have, I suppose. You know, I mean, with the N95 masks and all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But you know, I think she she didn't have the daily sort of ER center with people coming in and dealing with respirators. She did have one of the floors where she had to round on patients, where they had actually like divided the hallway in half, and on the other side of the sheets of plastic were the COVID patients, and once in a while she'd have to go in there and see a patient from a distance, you
I
know.
mean, I understand that stuff is. I mean,
Yeah,
those sort of clinical approaches or the clinical stuff is normal in hospitals. I think if you work in those places, it maybe is not as traumatic. But I mean, there's still a point at which, like, this is just a hospital, and now it looks like that scene from ET where everybody's in a spacesuit, and
yeah,
I just. I don't. Again, like I want to be clear here. Like I'm not saying that like one frontline worker has it better or worse than another, and we should like just the. I don't want to underestimate the sort of psychological effect of yes, you work in an oncology area. That's traumatic in and of itself. There's people dying of an awful disease. But now you walk in and everybody you've seen for your whole life working, Colette at the desk and John over at security. Now they look like an ET character, and like, I'm sorry, I don't look at Jason Truding the same way, and he's just got a cloth mask on. Like, I do wonder in 5 years, what's the medical community going to be? What's the trauma fallout from all that going to be once things sort of settle out and people are less scared every day? There's got to be something. I mean, maybe I'm missing something about the frontline healthcare workers, that they're just super people, better than you and I, and never have to think about this stuff. But
Yeah,
you know,
no, I think they all handled it differently. I mean, that's my experience, and from anecdotal stuff from my wife,
mm,
but I think, there's definitely people in those ER situations had it pretty rough.
hmm
And, like I said, she saw people, there would be people who worked in her office who would come down with it, and it would be a concern, and we just, you know, knock on wood, we somehow made it through uh, without any of us coming down with it that we know of. I mean,
hmm
who knows? Maybe she did get it and we all got it, and none of us reacted. I mean, it's one of those things. But she kept going to work. She'd come home, not touch any of us, and go on up to the shower.
no,
And
she doesn't touch you anyway, right? I mean, that's just a
nope.
generally safe approach. If I were to ask, if I were to talk to her, I'm kidding. Murray, I would absolutely touch you on your shoulder very politely. I'm curious, is there anything from in your conversations? I mean, Stephanie and I have been talking about this. We've been complaining about, like, oh, we need to be doing this and we should keep these places, like, everybody has their idea on how things are being handled by the government, right? And we're all experts all of a sudden, when really I'm barely an expert on, like, Steve Mackey's music, and I play his music a lot. Like, that's one thing I feel like I can talk about, and I'm out here being like, well, the CDC, like, I've
Right.
like I know anything. Is there anything in your conversations with a healthcare worker where there's just been a, like, I cannot believe, like, for instance, one thing, I'm not married to a healthcare worker, but it's baffled me that the government, no one, not one single person, has ever mentioned physical health, what you eat, what vitamins you take, like all of the things that are just like we should be doing that anyway. Just be like, hey, maybe a general multivitamin, maybe go for
Right.
a walk. Like, we don't have to fat shame the country, but you can say, like, other ways we can fight this in addition to a mask are, if you don't do any exercise, walk around the block once a day. Fauci could say that, and
Yeah.
he'd be right, possibly 100% right about something we all need, and like, instead of sending $1,200 checks, send everybody vitamin D supplements. Like,
Right.
no, I immediately am like, well, I need the $1,200 more, but, like, there's been zero mention about immune health, and I'm not an immune health, like, expert. I don't take care of myself. But when the world's shut down, shouldn't we be like, folks, maybe less McDonald's, maybe less of the Costco Oreos, maybe more of the Costco gummy vitamins? Go that route.
Right. No, it's true, and I know that like when the weather broke a little bit, and
Mm,
people started, around here at least, like, people going for walks in my neighborhood was like the thing.
yeah.
Like, that was where people sort of, you our neighborhood's kind of small residential, so
Mm,
you'd, like, you get out into the middle of the street, and the other people are on the sidewalk, and you keep your 6 to 12 feet away, and you
mm,
talk to people, and just stay far away. But look, tons of people out riding bikes,
mm,
or walking, and I think, I I think that's maybe put an emphasis on some of that for people. But you're right. I didn't hear. I've never heard any of it from the government. Not one.
not a peep.
You know.
I mean, not
Uh,
a peep about
you know that
any sort
uh,
of health.
in Indiana, they made it so that people who are on, wait lists for vaccines, in other words, like, I ended up on a wait list for our local hospital
Mm,
because Michelle was an employee.
mm,
That if somebody didn't show up for their scheduled vaccine, right, then they could call and say, hey, if you can be here in 15 minutes because we thawed this thing out, right? It's going to go to waste.
Right.
That you can come in and do it, and then a whole bunch of people put up a stink on who could be on those wait lists, right? Which that's fair, I guess, right? And then here though, you can apparently get on one, and I don't know. I'm not going to fact check myself now, but I've I've heard that smokers can be on that list, but teachers can't.
Yeah, I mean, there's things I
those kind of things are.
I understand,
and then it starts a whole debate, right? And there's a whole drama around all that, and
I mean, this is why I have some tiny empathy for not Andrew Cuomo, but for governors who are trying to figure this stuff out. Like Andrew Cuomo's got his own problems, but like, how do you protect your population?
Yeah.
Or what is your metric by which you judge whether or not you've protected? Is your metric the number of people working in the economy? Because if that's what your goal is, then your priority would be to vaccinate people my and your age, because we're the ones working. We're not retired. People who are above 65, when a government says we need you to stay inside until we can get you a vaccine, they're more able to. It's less of an impact on their day-to-day income. Again, I don't want to discard. There are other issues that come into play, but if your job is just your metric is only sheer number of deaths, then you're going to vaccinate the people over 65. That's who's dying, right? And it's people who are overweight. That's also who's dying. So, or people who are people have comorbidities, like.
Right.
So I totally could imagine, like, I understand why somebody in a big meeting at the highest levels of government in Albany or whatever would be like, how are we judging this? We do this, the cost benefit analysis thing is like, we do this all the time. There's a reason the FAA doesn't have their sort of criteria as to how they inspect planes to be 0% crashes. That's impossible.
Yeah.
They have to decide, we won't regulate, we are okay with a certain level of flaws, like, right? And so in our system and the way we do things, right? But past a certain point, we got to revisit, right? Because so many planes, like, how many people are we willing to let die? And to me, I've gone back and forth. Like, I don't want my mom to die. I didn't want, Dougie who ran Crossfire died, I think, of COVID. And it's like, no, of course not. On the other hand, now we're a year into it, and it's like, Papa's got to work, or I'm gonna jump out the window. and the other thing nobody's mentioned, in addition to vitamins or anything, or just general immune health, is mental health. I'm someone, my family has dealt with mental health my whole life, depression, anxiety. I deal with it now. I'm not like, woe is me. It's just a truth, And some people have a bum leg. I have a bum brain in some aspects. Like, being locked inside has been probably the hardest. I mean, if I'm gonna be like, woe is me for 2 seconds. It's been the honest to God, bro, in my entire life. I'd go back to being 19 years old and being bullied by you and Matt in the living room of the Hawk's Nest and being like, why are you guys making fun of me? It's not true that I smell bad. And you guys are like, you don't know how to take a joke. Like, that was initially the most traumatic moment in my life until now. And I'm just like, I actually, this is important to me. Being around people, hugging people is crucial.
Well, and that's when I talking about my kids, with this whole like participating in marching band. We were nervous about it, thinking, gosh, what are we doing? We're sending our kids who play trumpets to play trumpets around a whole bunch of other kids who play trumpets.
That and the French Horn are the two most saliva based. They have valves on them to get rid of all the built up spit.
They gotta play those high notes, and that means that air is coming out of there.
That COVID is going far, baby.
and what are we doing? Why are we doing this? And then, by the time we were halfway through, I'm like, just seeing the mental health improve of my kids, because they're interacting with other kids, they're laughing, they're solving problems, they're getting berated by their band directors for not hitting their spot. Dumb stuff.
They're saying stupid things around their friends and then being held accountable. Like, all the things that I did in school, that I had the benefit of being in the hallway at the University of Akron, where I could walk down there and there'd be all these things flying at me and I had to deal with it. And being on Zoom is just like, you don't have, not that there's not other issues of bullying and stuff there, but like, Oh, I just never realized how important that stuff was.
And I feel like what we've got to be able to do, and of course, now with the vaccine coming, I'm maybe naively optimistic, but I feel like there's a path at least for me to get some semblance of the life I knew back. I know it won't be quite the same. I don't know how it'll be different exactly. But honest to God, I just want to sight read some sixth grade concert band charts.
I mentioned hot cross buns earlier. I mean, that's a real reader.
It was play Glockenspiel on the Final Countdown.
Who knew how important that would be? Well, what are some of your? I mean, one of the things that I've tried to do that I'm not being very good at, but I think my therapist is trying to help me through is just sort of like this is a weird opportunity now in a way that I don't remember a time in my life where I've had this much unknowns. Like nobody knows anything. I mean, You talk to Princeton, like the higher ups there are like, the practice rooms there. If you walk into a practice room at Princeton, the minute you walk in, if you walk out, no one can enter that room for 8 hours.
Really?
Because of the way the ventilation is, and because of the way the state rules are, like just the way just because of the way the stuff is dealt with, that's their solution.
Wow. Oof. I mean, yeah, right. That just changes the whole
now
practice experience that I recall experiencing.
I mean, it's one person a day in every room. So once there's been 10 people in a build, like you got to shut. Anyway, I for 90% of my day think about that stuff and get depressed. The other 10%, I'm trying to make that equation a little better. My other 10% is like, how do I use this as a superpower? What's the thing I can do after this that I wasn't able to do? Like, what is this going to knock loose? And I'm curious for you, is there anything that, like, it shook the foundations of your worldview enough that, like, I feel like it's that game of Plinko, like there was this thing up here that was sort of always just going to bounce in this other hole, and now all the pegs got moved out of the way of the hole that I want it to go in. And I'm like, if I could just get that thing, I could drop it there again, and it's like, for 20 years, I never was able to drop something over there because I just knew it would never get in that hole. And now it's like, for 10% of my day, I think I can do it. And what is that for you?
As a teacher, I feel like it made me think about how I teach more. I think sometimes as like private lesson teacher, I have sort of like these sort of routines that I try to get kids, because and learning music is about developing routines and things like that. But thinking outside the box, I mean, I ended up buying another screen so that I could share the screen with a student, and we worked together on certain things, because it's not like you can't play in real time, unless you've got some new revelation for me.
Every once in a while when I lament public at like a SOCI festival or some online thing, like I'm just like, yeah, there's no way to play online. Somebody is always like, have you tried the app Jam Kazam? And I'm like, nope. And I don't even care if it's completely synchronous. I'm not doing it. Like at this point, I don't even want to hear. I don't even want to try to play it in sync with somebody online. Like I don't care if you can. I don't want to.
But I would say that it made me rethink how I taught, and there are things that I will take with me.
Like
in terms of teaching, like being able to put things on a screen, working with kids. What if a kid has a snow day or they're out? We have an option now. We can work on things. Some stuff, there's some stuff that you can't. I don't know how to teach a snare drum roll over Zoom. I've tried, and the sound quality, for one, everything just sounds like radio hiss. I mean, it sounds like, hey, yeah, that sounds good, I guess.
I'm sure it looks great.
It looks really good, I guess. It sounds good. I have no idea what you're sounding like right now. Right. So certain things don't work well. but I was still able to. Yeah, it made me think about how to explain stuff better. It made me get a better studio setup so that I could um, be more functional, and I actually used the time to kind of uh, to rethink my teaching space, and um, uh, I think that's one of the big takeaways. It started made me think about health more, my health,
Mm.
and what I eat, and after the initial snow day phase.
After the bulk Oreos.
Yeah, after the
Were they
bulk
okay? Well, let me ask you. This is going to be an important determining factor as to whether or not I truly judge you. Were they single stuff or double stuff?
single.
Oh, all right, you're fine. If you
Sing-
got the double stuffed, I was going to be like, bro, you have a problem.
no, double stuff, and they have mega stuff too. By the way,
Yeah, I listen, and in small quantities, I'll rock that. But if you're buying bulk, I would feel like somebody would come out and tap you on the shoulder. Costco should send you somebody and be like, "Are you sure?"
you might as well just be eating straight cream and sugar.
Isn't she a nurse? Aren't you married to a nurse? Yeah, I mean, one of the things for me that I think I used to teach a little history at NYU. I used to do a class a semester where I would just do listening and we would talk about some historical context, and like I knew enough to be dangerous. But about 3 or 4 years into my teaching at NYU, it became like I kept butting up against like what I knew, and then I felt like I was a bit of a charlatan. Like I'm not a historian. Like I don't feel comfortable doing this. And so not that I stopped learning. I kept going to Trinidad and hanging out and learning things, but I stopped teaching it and focused on the performance side of things and trying to get like more Brooklyn bands in the room and change the sound of the band and all that stuff. I had to teach history. I had to, thankfully NYU hired Kendall this year, and he's been helping me too because he's not from Trinidad, but he's lived there and he has family, and Bugsy stayed in his house with his parents. Like, so there's just some lecturing on that stuff with Kendall has been a real blessing because I've learned a ton. And I think my students have more of a context behind what it is that we're doing. At least that we're trying to do at NYU, for better or worse. And the thing I think moving out of this that I feel sort of an ethical responsibility to keep in the mix is some component of like history and context, and talking about Cliff and Ellie and Bugsy and Mia Gormady and Pat Bishop and Don Batson and all these folks, and just like maybe not given a deep dive, but just like this person existed. You
Right.
need to at least know that Pat Bishop ran Desperados, and just like when you Google Pat Bishop, you'll understand why that was such a big deal. Like,
With steel drum, it it it's like that a perfect vehicle for that. I mean, if you're playing the instrument and you don't understand the context, I think it's not that you can't enjoy it, or obviously you can, but you're especially if you're educating these kids, you're doing them a disservice by not giving them an understanding, and the more you can bring to that table, I'm sure like having Kendall there really helps that process as well.
I mean, there's only so much I can. Like, I feel confident. I have no problem standing in front of a Trinidadian steel band drilling them. Like, I have no. In terms of like what if I'm asked to do something and any authority I might bring to the table, or in terms of that sort of authority, like, yeah, it's nerve wracking, and I question myself a lot, but I'm never afraid to go in and do that. But with Kendall there, it's been like with historical stuff. It's like there's only so much I can just like. I barely know the history of Dover, Ohio. And there's corn. There was anyway. There's not anymore. It's all housing developments now. But there's only so far I can take them before they just need to get on the subway and go to Brooklyn. And then they need to talk to Kendall. They need to talk to Jerry, and they need to be in the room when Bugsy is yelling notes at them. Like, those are sorts of things I just can't do. I don't know how to do that. And it's the position of privilege that I find myself in as a white guy teaching steel pan in New York. That's a
Right.
thing.
So let me ask you, what are steel drum rehearsals like are you having rehearsals? Are you doing any of that?
Yeah, we're back in person now. We were remote from last March through last semester.
Yeah.
And then the first couple weeks of this semester, we were remote. But we started with doing like our rehearsal chunk is 1 hour or 1 day a week, 3 hours a night. So like Thursday nights from 7 to 10. And so the first couple weeks we started doing like the room has to be vacated every hour and a half for half an hour. And so what we do is we would rehearse half the band from 7 to 8:15, take a half an hour break, come back, rehearse 8:45 to 10 with the other half of the band. And then I found out that the numbers of people that are allowed to be in the room are actually higher than I thought. So we could get the whole band. So now we're able to meet for the first time 3 weeks ago with everybody in the room with still a half an hour break in between, halfway through. Yeah. And we're doing 2 panoramas and a rote tune. Like we're not doing a ton of other small charts. And one of the panoramas is one that we had started last year prior to the quarantine, so they basically knew it. And it's been, doing the remote thing it sucks. Like I was sending them click tracks. Very few of the kids had access to instruments. In the fall anyway, things were way more locked down. And so I would send them a click track and be like, sing your part and send it to me. And so they're just like like singing Iron Love to me. And then I would layer up all of their videos of them singing. So they would sing a panorama as a remote ensemble, As an educator, I feel like, okay, I taught them. That was a thing. They learned something from this, and their playing is better for having to have sung it for a whole semester. But being in person is so much better. Like, there's so many, like, I could just be like, let's just play it again. We just need to play in the room together. Like, and I don't even need to say anything. It'd just be like, let's just play. Let's just play. So for like the last rehearsals, I've just been like, again, like, I don't want to say anything. I just want to play with you all. Because we haven't for a year. And so that's kind of where we're at right now. We're in this honeymoon phase of being back in person a little bit. I have to get tested every week. There's like a whole rigmarole, and it's a little stressful, but it, yeah. And there's some things, the thing I've been surprised by is that the level of playing, or at least the sound of the band didn't I don't have to start over. There was something about the singing stuff, actually, like they got better at playing with a click. So their time got a little better. They learned the tune. They can sing all their parts. They just can't play them yet. And it's like going that route is actually easier than trying to go the other route. And
they understand the rhythms now, and they understand how it fits with the Met and all that stuff. So
totally. And they've heard their part. They've sang their part against everybody else's part. And so it's like things I never would do when we're meeting in person. I'm now trying to figure out, okay, it's like, well, I need to get them singing more. Like that worked. Now I just got to do that in person. Like we do singing every once, so sings a lot, but never just like, let's sing the whole panorama. And then I'm just like, well, I should do that with Skiffle Bunch too. Like I might get laughed at the first couple times, but if the 4th or 5th time they can all sing the panorama, like no other steel band in Trinidad is doing that. Like, so after this year, I feel like that little thing has been like, okay, I learned something, but bro, I want to wait till the next quarantine to learn something else. I'm tired.
I'm like, every so often I'll just say, okay, I'm done. Like, thanks for visiting.
Yeah.
Come back later, maybe. I still try to keep in touch with the people that I played gigs with here, and it's I think I played one. We put together a little percussion ensemble for a church service. With a couple of other guys that play gigs around, and I've had a few recording sessions. Mostly, since I'm mostly in a isolation booth anyway, it's fine for me anyway. But even that stuff's pretty thin. So to me, I just want to play music in a concert hall again, and I'm sure the first time I play through a symphony, no matter what group it is, I'll probably me and half the orchestra will probably break into tears or something.
Yeah, I mean it's
Like, yeah, and I envisioned this exactly what you were talking about. The conductor just being like, "Yeah, can we just play it again?"
yeah, Gustavo Dudamel's up in front of the LA Phil, and he's just like, "Let's run it. I'm gonna do this. You all can just come in when you're ready."
Right. But I imagine all these conductors that I know who are, sticklers and, tearing things apart, just being like, "No, I just want to hear the wash of sound."
I saw that the New York State, New York Times had a thing about New York City is opening up concert halls and like Broadway and stuff, but it's 100 people indoors and 200 people outdoors, and I'm just like, well, listen, the good news is So Percussion has been practicing for those shows from the beginning. I've been playing to 100 people since day one, baby girl. Welcome to the club. That is good. We could sell out the Met. Let's play the Met. Let's play this Met Stadium for all I care. It's sold out if there are 100 people there. This is the thing, like when we were talking about using our powers or like these things as a superpower. Every college kid right now can play a sold out show if they can just get 100 people to come. Like that was not the case in our world. Like, the number of times I played for 100 people in a 3,000 seat hall has been way more than I'd like to count, and it's awful. But when I know that's the most we can get in there, yes. That's a different thing, baby. Well, Murray, I've stolen almost an hour of your time. And I spoke. Do you know Chris Vandal, right?
Oh yeah,
yeah. I just did a podcast with Chris.
I was a roommate with Chris before you.
Oh, is that right? Well, you were just cycling through all the Joan Wenzel students, weren't you?
Yep.
Well, he says hello. He sends his love. Well, Murray, it was good to chat with you, buddy. I miss you, and I hope that Stephanie and I can come visit you all sometime, or vice versa. It'd be lovely.
Yes, and hopefully, I think we're all looking forward to travel at some point, and even traveling. I think all the traveling we've done since this whole thing started was to a park where there weren't people. I'd like to travel to where people actually are.
Yeah. The reason you travel sometimes is because there's different people there. Well, Murray, we need to schedule. You and Matt and Jeff and I did a podcast about Trinidad during the actual quarantine, and I feel like it would be an awesome thing if we could book a trip to Trinidad for next year and just bring in 2022 like it was meant to be brung in.
That would be what, the 20-year anniversary of when we went before?
We went in 2002, right?
2002. So yes, it would be 20-year anniversary.
20-year anniversary. Come play with Skiffle Bunch. It'll be great. And
Kong Chow.
Well, last time I was there, I drove by one of those, and I was just like, oh, I just felt like I was in a gas station again with Murray. And well, hey, buddy, love you. Stay safe and healthy. Tell your family we said hey, and I hope to chat with you soon. All right, take it easy, buddy.
Bye.
Okay, I hope you enjoyed that conversation. This podcast is brought to you by Liquid Drum, liquiddrum.com down in Waco, Texas. My good friend Todd Meehan runs an amazing percussion company down there. Great merch, great content. Check him out, liquiddrum.com. Also, Kyle Dunleavy, dunleavypans.com, DUNLEAVY pans.com. Kyle Dunleavy makes and builds all the steel drums that I perform and teach on in So Percussion, as well as at NYU and Princeton. He's an amazing tuner, builder, just a really nice guy, very dependable. Check him out. If you are interested at all in steel pan advocacy, want to learn more about the goings-on in pan in Brooklyn, check out paninmotion.com. My good friend Kendall Williams, Jerry Guy, Trisha Guy, and Arisha John run an amazing organization called paninmotion.com. Check them out. And finally, Alejandro Mirage runs an amazing clothing apparel company in Brooklyn that is steel pan centric. You can check him out at mangochow, CHOW, clothing.com. I own a bunch of his shirts. They're amazing, very stylish, beautifully made. Check them out. mangochowclothing.com. Okay, hope you're well. Talk to you soon. Bye.